much for spending time with me today. I'm Tabatha DiDomenico, and I'm delighted that you have taken a few minutes out of your day to talk with me in this session about volunteering. See if I can do it. Again, I'm Tabatha. I'm an open source DevRel and security advocate at G Research. I'm also the president of Security B-Sides Orlando. Just for some additional context on why I'm uniquely positioned to give a talk about volunteering at a cybersecurity conference, particularly one that's focused on women, is I have a master's degree in cybersecurity from the University of South Florida, a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies with minors in both information technology and women's studies, and a service learning certificate. So to say that I really like to volunteer would be an understatement. Both of my capstone projects for my degrees have involved volunteering in some capacity. But more interesting about volunteering is sort of how I came to get to this place in my career through my heavy volunteer work. As I've said, president of Security B-Sides Orlando. That was also my very first security conference. I was invited by a friend in 2014 to attend. Walked into the room in the lockpicking village, picked my first lock, and immediately was hooked. And now I've been part of the lockpick village to cybersecurity pipeline. From there, I was so juiced about going to B-Sides Orlando that year that when my friends suggested that I might go to DEF CON later that year, I said, sure, this sounds great. However, they were all funded by their employers, and I was out there on my own dime. And Black Hat, it was out of my budget. So what did I do when everybody else was at Black Hat walking the vendor floor? I decided to volunteer for B-Sides Las Vegas. Had I known then the caliber of people I was meeting at that event, I might have been more afraid. Thankfully, I didn't know what I was getting into, and I ended up, meeting folks like John McAfee. Oh boy. that was an interesting year. So that was sort of my first taste into volunteering as far as security conferences go. So today we're going to talk about why you might want to volunteer, some places you'll want to look for volunteer opportunities, how to volunteer well, and some things you might want to do after you volunteer. Of course, I'll try to save a little time for questions at the end. So title of my talk is Volunteering for the Win. So who wins? Everybody wins when you volunteer. In my opinion, the greatest gift you can give is your time. You can't get it back. So by giving your time to an organization or an event that you care about, you're sort of voting with your intent, and it's a huge gift to that organization. So attendees win when you volunteer. If you're volunteering at an event like this, and again, let me just stop real quick. Thank you to all of the volunteers that are here today, making this conference possible. So the attendees win because it requires bodies to put a conference on like this. It requires people to put PRs together to solve big problems in open source communities. We need people doing more of the work that needs to get done, sweeping the floors, the boring stuff. None of that happens without volunteers. So the attendees win in that way. The attendees also win because they get to meet you. And imagine you're pretty cool. So don't deny other people an opportunity to meet you. So of course the event benefits because they need power to get the event running. You also offer to the event the diversity of your perspective. If you've been to more than one event, you definitely have opinions on how that event should run. You have thoughts on better ways to do things, something that wasn't quite right, or more of what you would like to see from that conference the next time you attend. So by volunteering at an event, you get to help shape that event. You might be able to call out like, hey, I noticed the last time I was at this event that you didn't have a specific thing that was nice for me to have. Why don't we provide this? It's low cost, very easy to implement at this event this year. Now you've just created the event that you wanted it to be for other people. So then, same thing goes for the community. The community at large benefits by your volunteerism. Again, in that diversity of thought that you're bringing to the conference itself or to the organization itself, but also by fostering more communication and collaboration between the individuals within the community itself. So, and then you win, of course. The last thing is that you win. There's so many benefits to volunteering that yeah, I could go on. I could probably fill 5 or 6 slides with all of the different wonderful things that have come to me through volunteering. We'll just start from the top, networking. So just today, I've met several wonderful people that I would not have met otherwise. Granted, I'm not volunteering in the same way, in the same capacity. However, at every event that I've ever volunteered at, any community that I've participated in, I've walked away with at least one new friend. Oftentimes, it may not be apparent how that person's going to improve your career or you might be able to improve their lives. But down the road, by and large, you'll find that these individuals will serve you well, and you'll be able to leverage their network as well. So additionally, you get access to research. I had no idea that cybersecurity was considered a domain of war until my very first B-side. That rocked my world. Understanding different things about your industry that you are already in. You're not exposed to these ideas in your day-to-day role. By going to these conferences and participating in as a volunteer, being a room monitor, you'll hear things. You're like, I never thought of that before. And now you've got a different direction to take, something interesting that you might be able to elaborate on that research, pair with that person to learn more about it, create more research from it. Career paths. Everybody wants to get into cybersecurity, and then you ask them, well, what do you want to do? And then there's usually a blank stare. So by coming to events and volunteering, or volunteering in a community online, you'll get exposure to different career paths that you might not otherwise know about. There's been so many different talks by a wide range of cybersecurity professionals today that I would be surprised if someone didn't learn about a new career by coming here today. And then, of course, new skills. One of the things that I encourage our volunteers at B-Sides Orlando to do is, when we're intaking them, is we ask them, are there any skills that you have existing? Are there any skills that you want to learn? Is there any specific area that you want to dig deeper in? We try very hard to pair that individual with someone who's either an existing volunteer that has that expertise in their day job. So casual conversations can lead to really interesting outputs from that. Or we find a way to be able to grow that skill within the organization. So new skills this is a great way to learn new skills. From there, you can get attendance to conferences. If a conference is out of budget for you, volunteering can be an excellent way to get where you want to go. There's organizations like Black Hat Conference Associates, which is a paid volunteer role that you can apply for with Black Hat, and you do its long hours. But it enables you to attend Black Hat at a rate that's more realistic for a lot of people that aren't there on their employer's dime. And then CEUs. Most conferences that you attend, you will get CEUs from being at. Same thing goes for volunteering. So you're supposed to be working and getting exposed to the same amount of information. One thing I mentioned earlier in the talk is that both of my capstone projects were volunteer-based projects or service learning-based projects. So for me, while it wasn't necessarily a CEU situation, it definitely did aid my career growth by volunteering and by having the resource to volunteer for my projects. And then the reason why I do it at this stage is the warm fuzzies. Sure, my network has greatly expanded, but service has been in my heart since I was a child. My family has always been involved in whatever hobby they had captured their interest. They always went that extra mile to give back to them. So I've been involved in the defense operations for a long time. So as I was saying, my family's been in service for a while, so it comes naturally to me to want to do this, to give back to the communities and groups that have given me and my family so much over the course of my career. Yeah, I didn't start out volunteering to get ahead in my career. I started out volunteering because I needed a fun way to spend a day that didn't cost a whole lot of money. And from there, I've learned so much about this community and enabled me to take the next step to realize that security was a place that was for me and that I wanted to be in. So where do you look for volunteer opportunities? I'm going to suggest that you start locally. It's the easiest. If you're looking to do something in person, don't discount the number of volunteer opportunities that exist online. There's so many virtual conferences. I know some conferences that spun up during the pandemic continue to press on and continue in a virtual format, and that's their only intent, is to stay virtual. It's a great way to kind of dip your toe in the water of volunteerism and cybersecurity without too much risk. So locally, look for your B-Sides groups. Security B-Sides has had, they just updated the notes on our the other day. It was something like 800 events have been held worldwide for security B-Sides since its inception in 2011. That's impressive. So there's probably one pretty close to you. Other groups to look into are OWASP, that they usually have a local group. Local DEF CON groups can be a great way to get into the volunteering space in cybersecurity. Often these are individuals that are heavily invested and deep into the cybersecurity community and want to, hacking community, and want to bring that closer to home and have an opportunity to continue collaborating with other people. And then look into ambassador programs as well. Depending on which organization you're with, it might require a different level of commitment, and some ambassador programs are not accessible to volunteers only, but it is an opportunity and a path to volunteering.
It's a different program, like I've never heard of that outside of like outdoor gear companies.
I'm sorry,
What is an ambassador program?
you have a CNCF ambassador sitting right behind you that will probably tell you a lot more than I could. But we'll come back around to that in the end. And then the other place, look in the industry. As I just said, Black Hats Associates, Conference Associates is one place. DEF CON has their Goon program, which if you've never been to DEF CON, it's a volunteer crew that are well trained, work in different areas of the event, and again, long hours, and you're exposed to a ton of people, and you're meeting incredible individuals all day long. I'm not great at this one.
She won the story one of the original
And when it comes to DEF CON, don't just look at the Goon program. There's so many villages that aren't DEF CON sponsored villages that need help. Look into those smaller villages, the ones that are just getting started, the ones that are new, the ones that are existing that have been out there for a while that are just kind of not as popular. They all need volunteers and speakers as well. And then when you're looking outside of our industry, look near the industry. So I'm thinking things like local PHP meetups, Kubernetes meetups. There's so many opportunities. If you look in tech that you're using every day, there's likely an affinity or some sort of group that's involved with that, some sort of community group that you can get involved with to promote that technology. Also, focus on affinity groups. Conferences like this, Day of Security, which I just noticed the other day, have rolled out a volunteer leadership program. So if volunteer leadership is something that you're interested in, I would definitely take a look at that. And then Diana Initiative is another organization that's dear to my heart. They are a conference that happens during Hacker Summer Camp, the week of Hacker Summer Camp with Black Hat and DEF CON. There's whatever you're interested in, whatever your affinity or identity is, there is likely a group, an event, a community that supports that and wants to change that forward in cybersecurity. So investigate those. They definitely will need your help. And then if you're really, really feeling brave, you could roll your own. I don't recommend this unless you have extensive experience with event planning, if you're doing an event. But if you do and you want to ask me questions, ask other conference organizers questions, I'm sure we can work something out. Just get in touch with me and we'll talk. I promise not to scare you off from it. It's a lot of fun. So how do you volunteer well? So the first thing I'm going to think here today is referencing back to the keynote this morning. when they were discussing their boundaries and setting up what was non-negotiable for them. Go into volunteering knowing what your non-negotiables are. If you know that you have max 5 hours a month that you can commit to volunteering, don't sign up to run the event, right? That's just not realistic. So be very real with the amount of time and energy that you have to give it. It's very tempting, especially when you're excited about something, to want to go in whole hog. We're all volunteers in some of these spaces. And so when you get burnt out early or realize that you can't make that commitment as you wanted to so badly, it can get really hard to kind of speak up and say, oh, man, I know I signed up for that. And I know I'm going to leave you, stuck without somebody to fulfill this role. But it's much better to be upfront about that with yourself and the conference organizers or the community organizers as far as what you can give to that event. So, choose a role that might be most appropriate for where you're at. I recommend that if you are new to volunteering, look into picking up a shift role. Like look into shift work, the day of an event. Working with somebody, working registration is one of my favorite places to start, because if you are doing shift work, it doesn't require a ton of training ahead of time. It doesn't require a ton of time ahead of time. You show up and you start checking people in. It's a rapid fire network. You meet nearly everybody walking through this conference doors where registration does. Once you've had a little bit more time with it, start thinking into maybe leading that role. Maybe the next year you suggest that, I'd really like to see what goes into managing the registration process for a conference this size. Could I assist next year? Could I be your assistant? Go from there. And then pick something that sort of suits your interests. Don't sign up for registration if you are just the absolute introvert and you hate talking to people. We'll stuff bags quietly in a conference room alone, right? You can work swag. Everybody loves swag, and you get to work quietly by yourself, or not quite, whatever. What else do I have on here? Flexibility. Be flexible. It's oftentimes, especially the day that something will go wrong. Well, the scale of the wrongness is really just what changes. So be prepared for things not to be exactly as you had hoped or as they had been planned, and roll with the punches on that. What else do we have there? Consider leveling your skills up, or leveling up your volunteer experience, your volunteer time, and with a goal in mind of volunteer leadership. It is incredibly rewarding to see volunteers come together that all really, really want to be there. It's different than leadership at work, where everybody's getting paid to be there. The level of excitement that people are bringing into volunteering is incredible, and it helps sustain me. It sounds like it's a little bit strange, but it's self-fulfilling, right? I put so much into a conference as a security B-sides. The volunteers come back and just show me my excitement, my enthusiasm, just as much. It's incredible. So now what? You volunteered, you did the thing, you made connections, you learned some new skills. All of those connections, and I swear every networking talk has this, right? Oh, by the way, I don't think I mentioned it, but this is my favorite way to network, is by volunteering. Because I would much rather go and work side by side with somebody that I just met and learn about them, learn what they're into. Oftentimes I found that that individual and I have a lot more in common, and that conversation goes further than that room. We stay connected after the event, and maybe that person's my next hiring manager. Maybe I'm able to hire them. It's an awesome way to network. It sure as heck beats standing around with a warm Chardonnay trying to figure out what you're going to say to someone. So yeah, definitely follow up with these individuals that you've made connections with. Just drop a line to them. Let them know remind them where you met them. Like I said, that's in every networking talk out there. Follow up on the contacts you made, right? Give feedback to the event. We put out a volunteer survey every year. Even as attendees, you will often see these surveys come in. I encourage you, please just take 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be complete sentences, but just let the organizers know how they did. Let them know how they could do better. And if they have a specific volunteer survey, fill that out from your perspective as a volunteer. Genuinely want to know and improve things to ensure that we have a solid stream of healthy volunteers coming in. And then document your experience. if you can write a blog post, if you like are a type of person that likes to learn in public, I definitely would encourage you to do so. Others will feed off of your enthusiasm and maybe join us for volunteering again. Of course, update your CV or your resume with any activities, anything that's worthy of going on there. Even just the presence of your service work will often be with your foot in the door with an organization. I know a number of employers that definitely do look for volunteer work in the community when it comes to cybersecurity. And then the last thing is ask for recommendations. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to ask the event organizers. You might not like the day after the event, wait a week or two. Hey, would you mind writing me a recommendation? I worked as a room monitor for Day of Security 2023. I had a great experience. I handled 17 questions. Whatever you took from that day and you felt you gave back to that event, remind the organizers what you did. Make it easy for them to write you a recommendation on LinkedIn or in the future if you need that recommendation for a job. Okay. Oh, and the other thing too is give recommendations to the people that you work with. I don't see this often enough. There's no reason, especially on LinkedIn where it's built in, that you can't write a recommendation for your colleagues that you worked with or your peers that you worked with at an event. So conclusion, figure out why you're doing this. If you're here for career growth, great. Know that's what you're doing. Know that's why you're volunteering at an event or in a community. But know that going in and define that for yourself. Find your why. For me, it's warm fuzzies. For somebody else, it'll be something different. Volunteer well. We talked about some tips for knowing what your commitment level might look like, how to hold your boundaries, and follow up after the event. But most of all, have fun. I have just made some incredible memories and made some incredible friends through volunteering. And I hope that for anybody that's curious about volunteering as well. So from there, if anybody has any questions, I don't know if anybody, feel free to reach out to me afterwards at any of these links. I saw somebody in the Slack mention, don't feel like weird, don't feel shy about connecting with me. Like I put this up here on purpose, right? I want you to reach out to me, let me know. If you have any further questions after the conference or just want to share an opportunity you think I should know about, I'd love to hear. And I just want to give a thank you first to Day of Security for the opportunity to speak today about volunteering. Again, the event volunteers, the sponsors. I have to thank my employer, G Research, for the opportunity to do this. And of course, the team over at Security B-Sides Orlando, they're an amazing crew. My friends, families, and allies. I've had so many people open up the door for opportunity for me to walk through. And I would not be here today if that friend had not taken me to B-Sides Orlando. And then my husband and kids. As my husband said, I wish you were as excited about everything else as you do about conference updates. But here, this is who I am, this is what I do, and I love it.